Hello, I'm Ryan Johnson. I lead professional and custom education at the College of Global Futures in the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University. I'm also a volunteer on a team within NCSE that's been working for the past couple of years toward a consensus statement on key competencies in sustainability higher education programs. My purpose in this video is to introduce a package of information, a set of short videos from NCSE's Sustainability Education Community of Practice. This package has 3 parts, and most of the items here are bite-sized and very easy to consume. So if you're already familiar with portions of this, you can easily jump around to parts that might be more relevant or unfamiliar to you. The first part is a review of the work that's already been completed by this committee during the past approximately 2.5 years. You'll find a short video from ASU's Dean Christopher Boone about a committee and a recently released report by the National Academies. The report is called Strengthening Sustainability Programs and Curricula. You'll find a video from ASU Clinical Assistant Professor Katja Brundier about a recently completed Delphi study on this subject matter as well, and a third video from NCSE Research Fellow and Professor Emeritus Rod Parnell about NCSE's past efforts in this area, including groundwork about Australia's efforts on this topic. The first section of content should leave you with the feeling that there's been considerable effort, thought, involved in this initiative to date, as well as comprehensive literature review and many experts involved. In the second section of content, you'll again see Rod Parnell, who is the current chair of the Community of Practice on key competencies in sustainability. This time he'll discuss the draft statement, the consensus statement on sustainability competencies in higher education. This document includes information about why a consensus statement is needed, and detail about the process thus far to develop the consensus statement. Finally, the third block of content describes where the process will go from here, proposed future steps to further broaden this consensus. Rod Parnell and GCSE fellow Jordan King, who is a PhD candidate at ASU, will discuss a webinar series that we'd like you to be involved in that will start in early 2021. This is an invitation for you to join the effort, and we're committed to gathering more perspectives as well as diverse institutional and cultural contexts for this important project. And we'd like you to be involved. In aggregate, the picture that these 3 blocks of content form is of a thorough and thoughtful process, but there's more work to be done. And your involvement at this stage is crucial. I'll be back for a closing comment at the end of this collection of content.
Hello, my name is Chris Boone. I am the Dean of the College of Global Futures and a professor in the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University. My great pleasure to talk to you today about a recent report that I'm a co-author on with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine on strengthening sustainability education. I had the honor of serving on this committee with 5 other individuals. I'd like to recognize quickly the chair, Ann Kapuscinski, University of Santa Cruz, Garrick Louis at the University of Virginia, Aaron Brahmajam, the City of LA Mayor's Office, Ruin Agrawal at the University of Michigan, and Dorceta Taylor at Yale University. This committee was charged with trying to create an assessment of what we thought were needs to strengthen sustainability education programs across the country, motivated in part by the explosion of sustainability programs across the United States and around the world. And on the one hand, this is welcome. On the other hand, it raises some concerns about whether or not sustainability has core meaning in these programs, if it's something that as a concept and an idea and set of principles is taken seriously, or at worst, if it's just a label that some colleges and universities might be using to increase enrollment. So hopefully very few of the latter. Nevertheless, it's a chance for us to think through what we thought were key elements for trying to build a sense of what a coherent idea of a strong sustainability program should be. So I'm going to give you a link to the report at the end. This report was just released last month. I'm going to go over some of the recommendations of the report. I don't have time to go over all of them. The first, which I think will be a welcome one to this community, is we recognize the importance of developing a set of core competencies and capacities. There's been important work done by the NCSE, including some of my fellow panelists in this session, have done really important work in advancing the idea of core competencies and what we also call capacities. So not just having the knowledge and the capability, but providing students with the capacities to actually demonstrate that they're able to use these core competencies in addressing the complex sustainability problems that we face. A related idea is the committee saw great strength in using problem-based and solutions-oriented learning. This is in part because it's very difficult to segment out the knowledge sets that are necessary to understand complex social, ecological, technological systems. But if we present a problem or a challenge, or most importantly, ask students to think about solutions to a wicked problem, this allows them to bring together all of the core competencies and capacities and to use that in a constructive way to start getting at, hopefully, what we think are solutions to these problems. The third is to, within programs, is to promote the idea that students can serve as change agents. And this is important for sustainability in general, in that we typically do not accept the status quo. We believe that the trajectories that we're on in some cases are not sustainable, and we need to do something to intervene in those, to bend the curve, to change directions, to lead to new pathways. And so we need to instill in the idea in students that they themselves as individuals and as groups and as collectives can affect change. And one of the ways to do that is through experiential learning. So whether that's internships, if it's engaging with the real world, bringing them in, offering students to work on service learning opportunities, working with communities, we need to instill in them, the committee believes, the notion idea that they can actually create change. A fourth recommendation of the report is that diversity, equity and inclusion have to be seen as core concepts, not as nice to haves, but as core concepts fundamental to our understanding what sustainability is and how it's practiced. So that's everything from the curricula to the engagement of diverse communities, whether they're students, staff, faculty, or partners. These are fundamental, and it's not just an issue of what's moral and what's right, but the committee also understood from the work that we did and from the workshops that we held that this was also just a smart way of doing things. If we leave out, do not include diverse voices, number one, we may not be working on the right kinds of problems, and we may not be engaging with diversity of ideas that allow us to reach everyone, not just a small segment of the world's population. The fifth recommendation, or a fifth recommendation, was that universities and colleges need to have a demonstrated commitment to a very inclusive interdisciplinary approach. So it can't be tucking away sustainability just within, let's say, engineering or in economics or in public policy. That it seems to work best when it's something that's engaged with by the entire university. And because that's the case, there has to be strong support, we found, at the senior leadership level, because those are the levels at which leaders can incorporate, encourage, and incentivize entire institutions, not just segments of it. Another recommendation was to increase federal support for these kinds of programs. The explicit recommendation is a reauthorization of the Higher Education Sustainability Act, which was first passed in 2008. And we think that this is especially important for institutions that may not have the resources to start new programs like sustainability programs. So minority serving institutions, we think, should be a really important key target. We think that research needs to be done as well on the field, including what is effective pedagogy and sustainability. How can we develop a coherent sense of what program level learning outcomes should be, and how do we assess those? We need more data on sustainability jobs. The committee found what it was looking for these kinds of data. It's been very hard to track. At the moment, the data collection is very spotty. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has talked about collecting data on sustainability jobs, but has yet to do so. So we need some research on what's happening with our students when they graduate. What kinds of careers are they taking on? What kind of pathways are they paving for themselves and others? And then finally, we think there needs to be some serious consideration of the post-UN SDG 2030 goals. So what's coming next, and how can universities play a role in thinking about what they could be, and how the university and college community can contribute to achieving whatever the next round of our global goals might be for sustainability. And then finally, we had a lot of discussion on the professionalization of sustainability. There are several organizations, including NCSE, that are grappling with this. But what are the next steps that we need in order to create an association that can look after one another, share best practices, and then hopefully help to reinforce not just these recommendations, but other recommendations that come from the committee about the importance and role of sustainability in higher education. So for those of you who'd like to see the full report, you can download it at the National Academy's website. You can click on this QR code. If you're quick with your phone, you can take a snapshot of that, but you can also find it at nap.edu. You can buy the physical book, but if you look on the top right-hand side of your screen, download free PDF, you can download it for free there as well. And I'd really love to hear, as with the rest of the committee, any comments or thoughts that you might have. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Dean Boone, for your presentation on the purpose and results of the National Academy's Consensus Study Report on strengthening sustainability programs and curricula at the undergraduate levels. My name is Kati Brundias, and I'm a clinical assistant professor at the School of Sustainability at the College of Global Futures at Arizona State University. I really appreciate the opportunity to present the results of a Delphi study with 14 international experts in sustainability education on the framework of key competencies in sustainability. And this framework was synthesized from the literature and published in 2011 by Professors Wiek, Withycombe, Keeler, and Redman. We use this framework as a reference point because among the existing frameworks in sustainability education or key competences in sustainability, it is the most frequently cited to date. Why this Delphi study? Over the past decade, the number of sustainability programs in higher education has grown significantly. For the US alone, Vincent and colleagues found in 2017 an increase by 15% in just 4 years. So in 2016, there were 2,361 programs offered by 872 institutions. In parallel, projections for the US labor market in sustainability through 2024 also suggest a 10% growth, as reported by Johnson and colleagues in 2019. However, it remains a challenge for employers, students, educators, and program administrators to clearly articulate what competencies these programs develop in students. To provide the necessary clarity, our colleagues Glaser and Hirsch argue that it is now time to work toward broadly acceptable, detailed descriptions of key competencies in sustainability. And there's value in creating a shared frame of reference and quality standards. It would enable credibility and trust in sustainability programs. It would provide shared language around program level learning objectives, and it would facilitate both comparability of programs and an increased understanding of what sustainability graduates can offer to society without diminishing diversity and distinction among those programs. Recognizing this need, the now global Council for Science and the Environment launched this Delphi study to inform its effort of preparing a consensus statement on key competencies in sustainability to foster sustainability and related programs in higher education in the US. Against this background, I'll present now 4 select findings of the study. And the study explored these overarching research questions. First, to what extent does the group of experts agree upon the framework of key competencies in sustainability? And noting that the framework includes a basic definition of each competency, and second, an overall rationale expressed through the relationships among competencies, and third, a set of learning objectives for each competency. The second research question was, what additions, differentiations, and deletions to this framework do experts suggest? So now, moving on to the findings, let me share with you my screen. Here we go. So first, experts confirmed and refined the framework. In the image, you see the key competencies in sustainability illustrated through the icons and mapped onto the steps of a sustainability problem-solving process. Second, the experts emphasize the integrated problem-solving competency illustrated through the blue line. This integrated set enables students to functionally integrate all competencies with each other and facilitate successful performance and positive outcomes that progresses sustainability. Third, experts suggest to recognize values thinking as a lead competency. This would clarify values embedded in all other competencies. It would also help reinforce the integrated nature of the framework and the specific role each of its competencies plays to the process without diminishing their relevance. Such an inherent normative orientation in all competencies distinguishes the competencies from their use in other disciplines. The words of one expert make this very clear. He said, the key is to use competencies to apply them towards sustainability values as they can be expressed, for example, in the Sustainable Development Goals. The competencies alone, without being placed within a sustainability context, can be utilized for distinctly unsustainable, nefarious purposes and lead to very unsustainable outcomes. Fourth, experts proposed 2 additional competencies as illustrated through the red boxes. The intrapersonal competency involves self-awareness, the ability to reflect on one's positionality, as well as on one's role in the local community, as well as global society. It also involves to continually evaluate and further motivate one's actions and to deal with the rising feelings and desires. While experts agree that the intrapersonal competency, like the interpersonal competency, underpins all other competencies, experts were actually split in treating it as a competency or as a mindset. So more research needs to be done on this question. Then the implementation competency takes the results, which really is a thought product from the process of developing the sustainability solution, and implements this proposal on the ground. So compared to all the other thinking competencies, this implementation competency really is, or literally is, an action competency. So obviously, as mentioned, more work and more research needs to be done. However, I think the study can conclude that there is an emerging convergence on key competencies in sustainability. And this can help our future steps of further articulating each and all competencies, of driving curriculum development, as well as implementation and evaluation. And all of this can help to enhance employability and effectiveness of our graduates from these programs worldwide. To do all of this, we invite you to join these efforts in hopes to include more diverse perspectives nationally and internationally, as well as across cultural contexts. Thank you for your time, and I pass it on to Rod Parnell to walk us through the next steps.
Hi, I'm Rod Parnell. I'm here to provide some context, background, and institutional memory concerning the activities that we're talking about here today with respect to learning outcomes and sustainability. For a long time, administrators as well as faculty in higher education have been tackling the issues of learning outcomes and their assessment in sustainability programs that are either new or continuing to evolve. So NCSE wanted to do something to assist these administrators as part of its mission. We looked first at some successful programs to generate these kinds of learning activities. And what we found was what we think is the most successful one to date, which was a part of a federally sponsored program to look at learning outcomes across all disciplines in Australia. And this resulted in a learning outcomes project for environmental and sustainability programs that was endorsed by the Australian Council of Environmental Deans and Directors, entitled Environment and Sustainability, Learning and Teaching Academic Standards Statement Project. A lot to remember, but you can just Google the Australian Council of Environmental Deans and Directors and you'll get there. This project produced a multi-year, multi-stage process across the country with a wide diversity of participants, both within and outside academics. It had an international reference and evaluation group that helped assess the process and guide them forward. And it included trials at a few universities using these learning outcomes prior to the release of this document in 2015. What they did was develop program level learning outcomes for environmental and sustainability academic programs. They did not distinguish between environmental and sustainability programs, and we'll see why when we look at their outcomes, which look to be very useful for both environmental and sustainability programs. They took a broad-based approach focusing on interdisciplinary skills, attitudes, and abilities. And they adapted the Wieck et al. 2011 paper on key competencies in sustainability as they move forward. And what they came up with were 4 major sets of learning outcomes: in transdisciplinary knowledge, in systemic understanding, in skills for environment and sustainability, particularly cognitive, technical, and communication skills, and in ethical practice. These learning outcomes were designed to be a program level guide, not a mandate, and they did not specify particular disciplinary knowledge content within the program. They looked at undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs, but did not look at general education requirements or suggestions for university-wide sustainability education. Following the release of this project, there has been no coordinated effort to codify or make more rigorous these learning outcomes, and no move toward a next step, for example, certification. So using that as a model, NCSE, through what was then the Council of Environmental Deans and Directors, established a community of practice in learning outcomes and sustainability, with a goal similar to the consensus statement developed by the Australians and endorsed by the their Council of Environmental Deans and Directors. Unfortunately, we had no federal support or any kind of guidelines to help us with this project. So as a result, our objectives grew and changed as our work continued. But we started with the same understanding as the Australians, that what we wanted was a program level, not course specific set of learning outcomes and objectives, that we would rely on faculty at individual institutions to set their own learning outcomes for their own courses within the context of the program level. We didn't want a prescriptive guide. We wanted a general assisting guideline for both new and evolving programs. We didn't want a course or content-based focus, but instead we wanted to look at broad skills, abilities, and attitudes. We thought that at the heart of the program level should be interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary problem solving. That was what we thought was most important for students to get out of a sustainability program. Our process has been evolutionary and inclusive. We've focused on social, political, and environmental systems and challenges, environmental and social justice. We look to students as actors and change agents, not passive receptors of information. And like the Australians, we started with the Wieck et al. 2011 competencies. those being systems thinking, interpersonal competencies, anticipatory and futures thinking, strategic thinking, and normative competence. But we also added an integrative problem-solving competence, which we could all had established in subsequent papers. We took these ideas through a series of NCSE internal presentations and workshops, and then started taking them outside to the American Association of Sustainability in Higher Education workshops, to the Sustainability Curriculum Consortium workshops, to the Association of Environmental Studies and Sciences workshops, gave presentations to the National Academy of Sciences, to ASED, to the Australians themselves, to get their feedback as well. The results of these efforts have already been presented to some degree through what has been talked about with the National Academy of Sciences study that had been completed through the NCSE Delphi study that Katja has already talked about, and through multiple drafts of a consensus statement, which we hope to finalize at our NCSE members meeting in January of 2021. What I'd like to do now is introduce the current efforts that we've got going on right now by focusing on the consensus statement for key competencies in sustainability. When we're talking about this consensus statement for key competencies, what we wanted to do, as I mentioned before, is reach a wide consensus on the fundamental skills, abilities, and attitudes for sustainability students, not content knowledge. We wanted to look at a rigorous program development and administration that is, without having such a consensus and without having these learning outcomes, these key competencies in place, it's hard to imagine a rigorous program development. As mentioned, it's advisory but not prescriptive, and we hope that this key competency statement will be dynamic, not static. For example, we've more recently introduced the central concept of students as change agents. What we have is a general set of related key competencies in sustainability that are included within our learning objectives. Well, why did we choose key or core competencies as a mechanism for providing support or scaffolding to our member institutions? Well, we thought that such a statement would help to define sustainability education for university administrators, students, and employers. It would integrate a range of perspectives from a wide variety of both academic programs and also other stakeholders in sustainability education. It also helps to create a shared language so that we have converged on a common set of definitions for our vocabulary. And we like to think that these key competencies will create a shared framework for quality standards and for other people to reference, which helps to increase the credibility of our programs. Why NCSE? Well, you came to this meeting, so it obviously means something to participate in NCSE. And one of the central foci of the National Council for Science and the Environment has been on program level development and administration and operation of sustainability academic programs. We have over 100 academic institutions and a community of practice in sustainability learning outcomes. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. Our next steps then are reaching out, including at this meeting, to sustainability professionals and organizations across the fields of sustainability. And we hope to develop and approve this consensus statement on key competencies in the near future, which we will then implement and provide education to a broader population through a webinar series starting in the spring semester.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk about some of the next steps to support the consensus statement, but first I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Jordan King, and I'm serving as a graduate fellow for NCSE, working with the Sustainability Education Community of Practice. I'm also a doctoral student at Arizona State University in the College of Global Futures and the School of Sustainability. In an effort to build from the statement and finalize consensus on the reference framework for key competencies and sustainability that it describes, as a next supporting step, NCSE would like to lead a webinar series during the spring and fall of 2021. The series would be aimed at discussing the key competencies and refining ideas for programmatic implementation, as well as application in teaching, learning, assessment, and curricula. By convening a variety of experts from across the globe, the series would explore the key competencies in sustainability through national, international, and indigenous lenses in order to expand perspectives on the ideas presented in the consensus statement. This will include examining recent advances that have built towards the reference framework that we offer in the consensus statement, generating dialogue on different aspects of the competencies, and considering potential directions in practice and research. Particularly, we would hope that the participation in the webinar series would support brainstorming and exchange in how the competencies can be useful in diverse institutional contexts. We have designed the webinar series so that participants can earn micro-credentials by completing different elements of the experience. As the details for the webinar series are finalized, we will share more information about the process for obtaining these micro-credentials. We are excited about how they can help to promote discourse and learning on the key competencies in the higher education community. We hope that the micro-credentials will acknowledge efforts to continue the process of refining the consensus statement on key competencies and sustainability, as well as facilitating some capacity building for their implementation in higher education programs. So ultimately, the webinar series as a next step for NCSE on the consensus statement will strive to further the recent work and also look ahead to pathways for increasing the impact of the efforts to advance sustainability education at NCSE member institutions and beyond.
Hello again. Before Ryan wraps up this presentation, I'd like to spend just a minute providing an outlook on next steps that we might consider in moving forward with a consensus on learning outcomes in sustainability programs. I'm speaking here as a member of the NCSE Community of Practice on Learning Outcomes and Sustainability, and also as a former program and institute administrator and faculty member in environmental sciences and sustainability. What I see is the need for developing a broad-based consensus, which requires more than a one-off piece of paper. It requires more than a one-time statement at a particular time and situation. So what I hope will evolve will be a long-term collaboration and continuing evaluation of new and evolving programs in sustainability. I think the proposal that's been discussed and the webinar that will be coming in the spring are very good starts in this direction. But I also think something more permanent and comprehensive could be widely supported in the sustainability education community, including but not limited to NCSE. So in partnership with other sustainability education organizations, I think it's important to discuss how to move beyond micro-credentialing and postgraduate certification. That postgraduate certification or certification of professionals is not our mission and never has been. And there are organizations that are already doing a good job with that. But what I think we want to look at is how to assess and evaluate academic programs in sustainability. That is something like a formal accreditation process. We believe NCSE has the background, experience, and membership to take a lead role in this discussion. Obviously, many things need to be worked out in terms of the expertise brought to bear in this discussion, the diverse stakeholders who need to be involved, looking at what a budget might look like to help move this forward, sponsors for such an accreditation process, and partners who could step up with NCSE to move in this direction. So I hope that our subsequent discussion and ongoing conversations outside of this meeting can help us move forward in these directions.
Thank you for your time and attention to this block of content about the work performed to date toward a consensus statement on sustainability in higher education at NCSE. The information you've heard today will also be presented as an ongoing initiative at the GCSE winter meeting, and there will be the opportunity for discussion in a special breakout group that we hope you join. We look forward to hearing from you about how to further broaden, deepen, and diversify this important body of developing work. If you have questions and comments, please contact the chair of the GCSE Community of Practice, Dr. Rod Parnell, at roderick.parnell@nau.edu. And again, thanks for your attention. We look forward to an active dialogue.